Zenyge family. My name is Dwight Cox. I am in commercial and government sales with Yerrick. And one might ask, well, what's your title there at corporate? It's not a title, it's what I do. And what I'm doing is commercial and government sales. So what my sole purpose is to get us from interest, client interest, prospect interest, to actually closing. So Brian and I, we had a conversation to say, we know there's a lot of information that's actually out there. What I want to do is to share as much as I can to try to bring it in, and hopefully we get some synergy from here. Yes, I am at an event right now out here in Ocean City, once again representing the Zenyge and the Yerrick family on behalf of also Rustin Industries too as well. So what I want to actually share this evening with you briefly is kind of like the process, and that's what everyone is getting kind of like caught up on. So I'm gonna break it down to two processes when it comes to, we're gonna say, the selling of EV charging stations, because that's pretty much the hot topic right now. So EV charging stations, we're gonna say there's a commercial process, and then I'm gonna call it a non-commercial process. A commercial process and a non-commercial process. So let me do the easier one first. The non-commercial process would be this. In your Zenyge back office, you have products that's in your back office. You can actually sell those products in your back office. If someone, a client or prospect, just only want to go ahead and purchase an EV charger, they're in your back office. That's where you can actually just send them. As you already heard, I think last Wednesday, John Rustin actually mentioned that, hey, we can actually send some of those charges out within 7 to 10 days. They can have them on site. So that is not a commercial process. That is simply you send them that to your back office. There's no project or anything tied to it, and they purchase it, and it's actually shipped directly to the customer. So that is the non-commercial process. Okay. Now let's look at the commercial process. So I typed down just a few things, so hopefully you can actually follow along. And what I'll do, I'll end up giving this to Brian too, so Brian can actually disseminate this too as well. Here, I know it's being recorded, but for those who may want to just write some things down. So first, on the commercial process. So one of the first things that is actually needed, and I know that I might mention a form that you all may or may not have right now in your possession, but once again, we can make sure that you actually get that form. So the first form that is actually needed. So you find a customer a prospect who you have a conversation with them. They say, okay, you know what? They might be interested in EV charging stations. So we have a form. It's called a client intake form. A client intake form. The purpose of this form is for the commercial division is actually going to use that form to say, hey, Brian Frazier talked to said customer, and this customer is not tied to him. So it's one of those ways to link it in so we know who the deal is actually going to be, who the deal is actually been made through. So that's the client intake form. And just to make sure that we understand. Now, all right, so on the commercial process, remember, this is a process where it's going to be considered a project. So this is not someone going into your back office. This is actually a project, meaning that, hey, installer going to come on, there's going to need to be a site visit, those things. So notice I did not say that on the non-commercial side. So on the commercial process, installer, site visit, all those things are going to be necessary. So the first form that's to be needed is the client intake form. So, and what it contains, it's going to contain the customer name, the location, what are some of the services or products that they're interested in, EV charging, energy saver, solar, whatever it is, it's going to kind of like name those things. So that's going to be the information that's going to be there and who the deal pretty much belongs to. So now the customer, we're going to say the customer has now said, okay, well, you know what? You've talked a little bit, and the customers think they're interested and they want to know more about it. Like, hey, well, what type of EV chargers you all have? What can we actually end up doing? Remember, we are not looking for you all to be all-tail sales expert on the product. That is not what we're asking everything to do. It's really you all taking the opportunity to get the interest of the customer, get the customer's information, and then actually allow us to be able to make the relationship with the customer, and then go ahead, get the intake form, and have that installer to come there on the site and actually talk to the customer about what their needs are. Because let's be truthful, none of us have actually been through any type of all-tail training to go ahead and talk specs, to the letter. So if you've heard it, paralysis analysis, because you're like, okay, well, hey, you need to learn all the specs. I'm telling you right now, that is not something that you want to go ahead and actually end up doing. I think, Brian, you and I were using an analogy before about, okay, well, say for instance, you have all of the information on there. I can't see a show of hands and everything, but how many people on the call right now, Brian? About how many?
We have about 122 right now.
122. So we're going to say out of the 122, we're going to say 10% of them. So that'll be about 12.2 people. About 10% of them are actually true sales professionals. Okay. And this is the point. So out of those true sales professionals, we're going to say that amongst all of them, they have at least about 10, 20 years of experience. And this is getting with the EV charger. So you go there and you go to a customer because you have sales experience, and you say, you're versed in the EV charging stations. And you say, hey, and the customer come and asks you about how many amps it is. And it's like, okay, hey, this is a 50 amp. And so you tell the customer, okay, well, I know this particular EV charger, and it's a 80 amp EV charger. So what happens when the customer asks you this question? Well, salesperson, can you please explain to me what is the benefit for me to go from a 50 amp to an 80 amp outside of cost? What is going to be the benefit? Are we really equipped to go ahead and answer those questions? That's the reason why, what we want to go ahead and do is allow those people who are actually, who are trained to actually do that, who understands electricity, understand those power, to be the technical experts. And that's going to be the installers and those who are helping design the layout. So that's what I want to make sure. So we want to make sure that we try to really stay away from really getting into the technical aspects of it. So other than what we see in anything in brochure form that we can pull from the website, you stick to that. And you want to just pretty much do an overview of what the capabilities are. You know what, hey, this particular amp, it can actually charge a car within 15 minutes. It takes an hour. Stick to those basic, and then allow the customer or the particular prospect to be able to move forward. So once again, that client intake form. So after the client intake form, you got some interest, and now the customer is thinking they want to go ahead and move. So the second thing is, before we can actually start showing them products, we want an NDA. NDA, what is that? A non-disclosure agreement. The question is, why do we need a non-disclosure? I know that's been some of the paper. Why do we really need it? Well, you've heard us say we're in pre-lunch. Well, what does that really mean to you? What does that really mean to us, that we're in pre-lunch? Well, we have proprietary information that we don't want readily out there in the general public until we actually end up going public. So we want to be mindful of that. So we have to protect our investments. And for the NDA, what that actually means is that if a company, we actually end up showing them and start telling them a little bit of proprietary information of what we're doing and how we're going about our business, then if that company decides to go out and put our information out there, then we could suffer a significant loss. I mean, that another competitor can get that information and we'll say they corner more of the market than we do. Well, they just cost us a financial loss. Well, what would help us to be able to recoup some of that financial and anything lost back from them? It's called an NDA. Some people, they actually have those on their jobs. I know my current role at my corporate job now, I had to sign an NDA. And I know what I can and cannot end up doing based off of it. So it's the same thing. It's just more so of accountability piece. And to be truthful, it's also going to weed out people who are just trying to shop you. Okay? So when you go and you actually present and tell them that you need an NDA, then they know you're serious and they know you're representing a serious company, so a real company. So, and that's why we actually want and we need those NDAs. So the third thing, if we're going to go ahead and progress, the third thing is actually going to be needed is a site visit form. So this site visit form, it gives a little bit more detail as to what the project is really about. So still have the customer name, all those things, but okay, who are their power company, what are they actually trying to go ahead and actually doing? How many units are they trying to go ahead and actually end up powering up? Those type of things. Now, mind you, this right here is something that your customer, they might be, sometimes they're even more informed than we are. So your customer can go ahead and actually end up stating what exactly that they actually need, or what it is that they actually need, and they can actually help fill out that form. So ideally, we'll want them to fill that form out, but you can also assist them with actually doing that too by asking those questions that are on those forms. So I just mentioned at least three forms: the client intake form, the NDA, which is the non-disclosure, and then also the site visit form. So even if you do not have those forms right now, please know that I'll make sure that Brian actually has this information, and the group that he emailed everything to, that we'll actually end up getting that out there to you. So now we have those three different forms, and you fill them out. And mind you, the client might not be able to fill out everything on that site visit form. That is fine, but we at least want to try to get as much information and everything as possible. All right, so now what do you do with those forms? You got them completed, now what do you do? Well, the next step is to email the client intake form, the NDA, and the site visit form. You're going to email that to Teresa Perkins. She's the VP of Commercial Sales Division. You're going to email that to her. You can copy myself, Cynthia King, with that. But why? Why are you actually doing this? Because at this point, you're requesting a site visit for the client, for the installer to be able to come there to the location to try to do the install, to come and actually do a site visit, look at, and see what the customer can do. Because what the customer might have wrote down and say what they want, they might want 15 EV chargers, and you're like, okay, great. But when that designer and that installer come out there, they might say, well, listen, you don't have enough load to be able to go ahead and do this. You only can actually do 10, or you can only do 3, or whatever. And that is the purpose of that. So that also protects you, protects our brand too as well. And at the end of the day, we want to be good stewards. You know, we're not trying to sell a customer something that they don't need. So that's another reason why we want to make sure that we actually do this. So we're going to email that form there. And so now next step, okay, we've emailed that. And at this point, I'm going to make sure that I'm crystal clear on this. The client will be contacted. So step 5, the client will be contacted by the installer, not you. The client will be contacted by the installer to set up a date and time, and or corporate, to set up a date and time, everything, what's convenient for them, for the installer to come out and do the site visit. And so once that is actually done and the date is actually made, then during that time, once that date has been given, then you will be notified as the person who actually is broking that deal. You will be notified of when that date and time is actually happening with your particular client. Best practice is for you, especially because most everyone on here probably have not actually completed a EV install. It will be good, a best practice for you to be there during those times. You know, if your work schedule or your schedule permits, it would be a best practice for you to be there when the installer comes there, to at least be able to see how the process and everything goes, and also see who you're dealing with too, as far as that. So now once that is actually done, the next step, the installer, after they've done the site visit, they would then go back and do like their own like workup. Okay, they've made the design, decide, hey, what's going to be done, and at that point, it would then start going to design. It'll be worked up, and we'll say almost like the invoice part. So now the customer will have an idea of what it would cost for that install. So you look at the install, they would know that whatever the pricing you'll be working with the commercial dudes, as far as the pricing of the EV charge, so they will have an idea of what their cost is. Now during this time, what we haven't talked about is funding. How's the project funded? Well, that is also one of the information that I neglected to say, but in that client intake form, it actually talks about that part. That's one of the questions on there about, are there funding? Would they need funding? Those type of things. So for those who are actually part of Sequoia, Sequoia once, it's us. So we can actually end up using that, or the client might say, hey, they already have their own funding. And once that is actually done, the client is actually being invoiced, finance is done, install is actually scheduled to go ahead to go. Now, whether or not a down payment, this is be more on the back end, whether or not down payment, half down, whatever is going to be needed, those details are actually worked out. on the back end. And so now you're at the process of pretty much have closed your deal and now is actually working through the installation. So that is kind of like an overview of how the process, and it says goes when it comes on the commercial side. And I hope that, if you all do have questions, if you don't mind, if you want to drop my, I don't know if I can actually drop my I can drop my email also in the chat, anything right now. If you have any questions, I'll drop my email. I'll drop my cell phone number in the chat too as well. Also, y'all can feel to reach out Nathan and Brian. But I want to give at least a high level overview of how it is non-commercial and then also on the commercial side. All right, and I'll turn it back over to Brian.